بسم الله
بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. اللهم أجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مباركا واشرح لنا صدورنا ويسر لنا أمورنا. اللهم زدنا علما نافعا وعملا متقبلا وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. Thank you very much, viewers, for tuning in today. We'll be speaking about a topic that has hit home recently, domestic violence, and I'd like to put it out there. If there is any triggers at all during this episode, and you are someone who has experienced or currently experiencing domestic violence, then please contact 1-800-RESPECT to receive immediate support and immediate alleviation for what ails you. May Allah make it easier upon you and your family. Alhamdulillah, today we are with our brother Danny Mikalti as part of NZF's Real Talk. Today's episode, I'd like to plug NZF's Healing Forward program. So to show that your zakat is in action, NZF has specific funds to relieve those who are experiencing domestic violence, whether it is women, men, or children. NZF is there every step of the way to assist in all aspects of taking care of these affairs and ensuring your safety and your security. NZF is there for the community, and that is only by receiving your generous donations and by paying your zakat to NZF. Part of the Healing Forward program as well has a component that shows a proactive arm or approach where they assist in funding marriage counseling and assisting in keeping families together. Because we know that in a current society like today, the family unit is the first step to ensuring that our children and us as human beings are functioning in a correct way in society. The family unit is there to protect us. The family unit is there to allow us to traverse the world in a safe way. For NZF here is assisting in ensuring that those who are struggling in keeping a family together are assisted in that as well. So it's not just a band-aid solution, nor is it just a reactionary approach, but also there is a proactive arm. So please dig deep, support NZF, support the Healing Forward initiative. Brother Danny, as a man of, mashallah, great caliber as yourself, a man of great experience, just shy of 20 years in the police force, you would have seen it all. And I'm sure that you were part of many different positions and units in the police force. I remember vividly as a young man growing up, your involvement during the Cronulla riots, how you were pretty much the negotiator or the communicating person in between. We'll touch upon that in regards to your experiences, but let's start off with, firstly, what you've experienced throughout your police career regarding domestic violence, and we'll let the talk, or we'll let it grow organically, inshallah.
Thank
Go
you.
for it.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here. Look, I think I had a very strong focus in terms of domestic and family violence. Even when I started at Bankstown, which was basically the end of '99, beginning of 2000, there was a lot of violent crime in the area. And as the years went on, from working on the front lines, I responded to many critical and very violent domestic violence situations. But then my career then took a progression into actually focusing and specializing in domestic and family violence and child protection. So I had the fortune to lead a team for just over 8 years, the domestic violence response team, where police and child protection workers, so back then docs, worked with me hand in hand, and we were dealing with like easily 300 to 350 reports a month, just for Bankstown Local Area Command. So yeah, there's been an extensive experience in that space. I continued then to start to guest lecture at the University of Western Sydney on domestic violence, and I continue now after the police to consult for government and non-government, and we assist frontline domestic violence caseworkers in high-level strategy, threat management, and keeping up with the trends in terms of the technology that's being used now to stalk victims. We live in an age now where you can be stalked 24/7.
Yes.
So we always have to be on the cusp of what the technology is going to bring, so we can counter these violent crimes.
SubhanAllah. Speaking about those 350 cases I used to deal with a month, are there any cases that stood out with you that had a profound impact on you? So, like at the moment now, you're more of the higher level bird's eye view strategy in how to deal with these. You can say direct conflicts that occur.
Yeah.
You've seen it all,
Yeah.
from from the bottom up.
Yes.
I'm sure that the emotional intelligence that you were required to have at that early age, you as a young man starting out, whatnot, that emotional intelligence at that time, it would have had a major impact on you as an individual.
Definitely. I think there's only so many violent crimes you can see anyway before it that has a profound effect on you. And when you're growing up and growing a family, the moment you have your own children, I think what started to have a profound impact on me was seeing children that were the same age as my children being abused, by family members. That made it very difficult, especially towards the end of my career in that response team. But we've seen it all. We've seen significant violence used between, whether it's boyfriend, girlfriend, father, son, husband, wife, any kind of domestic relationship, and obviously it can culminate in many murders. I mean, this is where we understand every single police station or police command has a domestic violence specialist, at least 1, 2, or 3. You don't have that for shoplifters.
What is a domestic violence specialist?
So domestic violence liaison officers or the domestic violence response teams exist in local area commands or police area commands, as they're called now. And basically they're a team of dedicated police that are trained to disrupt domestic violence progression. So whether they're responding on the coalface, or they're doing the back end support with victims and through all the way to the legal framework, processing of the AVOs, the charges, and working with other units, the other stakeholders that impact and disrupt domestic violence. Because that's how serious it is. And if we're going to start losing, one woman a week, and we're back to those figures again, it's a significant crime. I mean, we need to understand the fact that the stats have always been very confronting, and I would say those stats aren't even accurate because a lot of people don't report domestic violence. Definitely. So if you're telling me the figures are 1 in 3 have experienced, witnessed, or perpetrated domestic violence, that's 33% of the community.
And that's what's been reported.
That's unbelievable. I mean, if I told you there was a disease killing 1 in 3 people, what would you do about it? There'd be pandemonium on the streets. The government would be forced to its knees to come up with something to stop this. Look what COVID did to us. That wasn't 1 in 3. So we got to not lose sight of the fact that domestic violence is a very, very serious issue amongst all communities, and the response required to this can't be just from one person or one unit or just government. This is a whole of community response.
Definitely. In regards to our community, how have you witnessed domestic violence manifest itself in our community and in comparison to other communities? So we know that DV exists everywhere. However, I don't know if this is my bias here or my closed off reading or viewing, but when our community is involved in DV, the media makes it out as if DV is only rampant in our community.
Look, I think we can't escape the fact that our community has always been a political potato, hot potato. In terms of facts, is our community overrepresented in domestic violence? No. You will find domestic violence where you find communities.
Yes.
As long as people are in relationships, you're going to find domestic violence. We don't want to reduce the inherent psychology of domestic violence, which is really power and control in a relationship. How do I view you as my partner, right? The moment there's an imbalance in that view, there's an opportunity for a dysfunctional relationship, and that's where domestic violence can breed. It's not inherent in a faith or an ideology or a race. It comes from how individual views the other individual in a relationship, and that psychology has come from how he's raised, their environment, and all these other factors. I wouldn't say where the Muslim community was ever overrepresented in the statistics, and definitely like where I was. And I was in the south. I was in the hub, southwest of Sydney. Our statistics definitely were reflective of the population we were in.
Yes.
Right. What is unique, I would say, to our faith is that faith can be used as a weapon. So I would interview thousands of offenders.
So what you're trying to say is that certain verses, Quran, Hadith, would be manipulated in action, in understanding, in understanding then action to then perpetrate
Even-
that
yeah.
struggle of power.
Even not even necessarily, like that's if they're smart enough to know to recite verses. It's just rhetoric. So just saying, hey, Islamically, you're my wife, you must abide by this, not citing what the verse is or citing the authority, it's just saying it.
Yep.
And there's that mixture between cultural
but then
influences.
the abide then moves on to the power and recognition and the
Yes.
control, as you were saying, yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I'd have that conversation a lot with many perpetrators. She has to do this. Where'd you get that from, brother? But I don't know. You don't know. But you're doing what I call religion by sizzler. All right? It's like a smorgasbord. I'll take this and I don't want to eat this, but I'll take this from the faith and I'll juxtapose it the way it suits my agenda.
So it's a sort of faith issue here. It's an issue of what can I use to suit my agenda, as you said.
Absolutely. It's
What
manipulation.
happens on the other side?
Well, then what happens then to the victim? The victim now is not only believing that she's an inadequate wife, she's an inadequate Muslim. She's an inadequate worshipper. She's an inadequate family member. There's shame. And then how do you reach out to your sheikh after that? And who do you reach out to? And unfortunately, what we would see, and it's, again, not unique to the Muslim community, but definitely existed, there really became the men rally around the men. The women do not rally around the women. I would go into courtrooms, and the only person supporting that domestic violence victim was the advocate, myself, and that's about it. Where the guy had the whole village on the other side, men and women sitting on his side. And what we got to understand too, there are these domestic violence offenders, especially a certain type of narcissistic offender. He's a charmer. He knows how to manipulate. He knows how to be. He's very popular. He brings in the women. So it's gaining and sort of nurturing this fake
Persona.
popularity and persona, absolutely, and that makes it so much more damaging for the victim because now she's isolated even further. So how she feels internally is very psychologically damaging, and it's worse than the physical effects of the domestic violence in many cases.
And then the control continues because now he has the community behind him against her.
Yeah, and then would you call the police again if you're the victim, if that's what happened to you the first time? So, this is what happens.
So on this point, I find that there's a lot of religious talk around, is it allowed to call the police? Is it not allowed?
Yeah.
Am I calling on my Muslim brother or sister or what have you, or back and forth? And this is shared around not just by laymen or like lay people who don't know much.
Yeah.
It's actually like seen as a form of scholarly advice.
Yes.
How much has that shown up when it comes to the DV cases?
Look, again, it's pockets of the community. Unfortunately, some things are ethno-specific. And I would not be lying if I told you I didn't come across that. I definitely did come across that in certain times. Luckily enough, it wasn't that high volume, but it's extremely damaging. Okay, so how would you like us to function in this state or in this country? We can't. So then, when I play football, I'm not going to recognize the whistle. I'm not going to recognize halftime. No, I wait for my Muslim brother to call halftime. Like, that's how ridiculous this is. So, what would you like to happen for your sister who's getting bashed, right? She's just take it and have sabr and forgive. That's what you think it's about. She's supposed to have her, she's supposed to be in danger. And what would you do if someone was assaulting your daughter? What would you do if someone was assaulting one of your family members? And would you have sabr if someone punched you in the face? So the inherent irony and the hypocrisy of this argument is really easily destroyed when you've got the person in front of you. But unfortunately, there's a lot of talk, a lot of squawking of the pterodactyls, I call it.
No. Yeah. Now, let's not shy away from the reason why this subject is being spoken to now.
Yeah.
It's due to the recent event where we lost a sister a few weeks ago, Allah yarhamah, to domestic violence. Could you shed light upon the events that took place and our reaction to it as well?
Well, I think
as a community, how was our reaction? Was it just something passed on, social media and everyone moved on? Was she just another statistic?
Look, I think for us, because she was an obviously Muslim woman because of the scarf, so it's showing the world what her belief system is or what she purports to be. So it automatically puts the spotlight on us in that area. What's funny is, all right, the Muslim is a domestic violence offender, but the victim is also a domestic violence victim. It's tragic. It's not the first time in our community, and it's not going to be the last, unfortunately. It gets attention again because of the optics, right? But it goes back to the point, and what's wonderful about what's happening here today, if I go back, 15 years, in having conversations with certain mashaykh in our community, what are you talking about on the pulpit? When you have Ramadan and you have thousands of people at the masjid, you've got finally families, fathers, sons, you've got a captive audience. Now's the time to speak about these issues. It's not just about speaking about domestic violence. Let's peel back. Let's talk about the building blocks. Let's talk about the relationships. Let's talk about the duties of a father. Let's talk about the duties of a husband. Let's talk about the duties of a wife, of a daughter. And if we talk about...
Like I use the word duties and not their rights or...
Yes.
Obligations.
Absolutely. It's not what you can do for me.
It's service to each other.
It's not what you can do for me. Let's not talk about, these are the obligations of the wife to the husband. Let's peel it back. As a man, do you know the impact you have when you become a father to that child? The psychological impacts on your son, what you're teaching him in your actions, but what are you teaching your daughter? And this
is acceptable. This is how this is normal living.
Yeah. So the first relationship he or she sees as a child is how mother and father are. What are we going to do here? If a father is going to belittle his wife in front of his children, what are you teaching? Okay? And there's the power dynamic. There's authority and subject. Master-slave relationship. We only have one master-slave relationship in Islam.
Between us and our Creator. Definitely. SubhanAllah. On this point here. So, we understand that there are support mechanisms for domestic violence. Would you like to share some of them?
Yeah. I mean, look, the wonderful thing about our health system is, you can go and see your GP privately, safely, and have confidential conversations. What I found especially that I would teach, the women in the community, especially that were terrified of coming to the authorities straight away, go and speak to a trusted health professional. They're automatically obligated to keep it confidential, but they will also do what's in your best interest to protect you. And they should be armed with the information on what happens next. With the police, there is discretion in many crimes. If you do something in front of me in traffic, I have the discretion to give you a warning. In domestic violence, I have no discretion. In domestic violence, if any kind of personal violence offense is detected, action needs to be taken immediately. So this can be very terrifying to families, to women especially, who are terrified of their husband. What's going to happen if I call the cops? What happens if he finds out? What happens? Blah, blah, blah. Sometimes the safest way, and because he's going to know you went to the police station, but if you're going to get a health checkup, go to see a counsellor, a psychologist, anyone in the health profession, I find that was a soft entry and a safe entry to be able to express the situation that you're in.
And it's a building block for them because they're now pulling down years of trauma, years of control.
Yeah. Very few people call the police after the first time something happens.
Concrete, hard walls that they now have to break down.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And how these perpetrators act and how they operate is to ensure that they control the entire lives of these people. Yeah. So their phones are in their names, their cars are in their names. Everything that belongs to that individual in life on paper belongs to them.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the entrapment that these women are in. Likewise, men as well who also go through this, and before our viewers, some of them, say that this is a one-sided argument. It isn't. But at the same time, there is an over-representation of women when it comes to domestic violence.
By far. And I get the same flack when I'm lecturing. Yeah. But yeah, there's no denying there are men that are victims in domestic violence. Most men are victims of domestic violence at the hands of other men. However, yes, and there are outliers where like minorities that play the system and use it in family law court to think, I want to get the kids. So all of a sudden the husband's a pedophile when she lived with him for 40 years and he was fine. The moment there's a divorce and splitting assets, now he's a pedophile. Yes, that happens sometimes.
I'm sure the court system has caught up to that now.
Yeah,
now.
So the court, this is
10 years ago, we've now, so I'm sure the court system would have caught up to the games that were played on both sides of the field.
You'd hope so. You'd hope so.
Is that happening?
Look, you'd hope so. At the end of the day, the court is a system of who can present their evidence the best.
Mm.
You know, when you boil it down, you know, let's be real. So we'll always get paid the big bucks. But at the end of the day, we're looking at understanding that it's not just what the reality is, it's the perception. Because in this country, alhamdulillah, you can't be eliminated from all access to finances and what he's going to let you think. But to that victim, it's real to her. She believes it. She believes she'll never find someone that's going to protect her. No one's going to believe her. No one's ever going to give her money. No one's going to take her seriously, because that's what he has imprinted in her brain, right? He's had years to hone this strategy, and that's what's happened, right? It's a long, as you've said, this is an investment in psychological warfare. That's what's happened, right? So knowing how to unpack that needs a trained eye.
In regards to all these support mechanisms that are out there, is this enough? Are there gaps in this system?
There are definitely gaps in the system because of the sheer volume. So how many services could possibly keep up? Homelessness will be a factor.
Yes.
Right. So it's not just, okay, let's say there's an AVO, but you don't want to come back because he knows where you live, because you're terrified, because a piece of paper may not stop him. As we've seen, it doesn't stop everybody. Yes. Right. So
especially if they're of that, if they're that mentally ill that they believe that she is his property and no one else.
That's right.
So it's better for me to take that away than someone else.
Yep. Absolutely.
What's a piece of paper?
Absolutely. So then the smart thing for her will be the safest thing. Get out of there, right? Go somewhere where he doesn't find you, which usually means she has to escape her own support networks.
Yes.
So what do we do with school? What do we do with childcare? What do we do with friends and family? Because if I want to find you, I just wait for your mum's house.
Yeah.
Right? So then that gets cut off. So now I've put someone who was already isolated for so many years with more isolation, with no means of financial sustenance. That's a very terrifying and daunting prospect if you don't have the right guidance on how this needs to be done. So yes, the domestic violence services will help you do this. There are programs that help you get out of the home with support within Australia, definitely in New South Wales.
Are they culturally responsive programs?
Look, we have, alhamdulillah, culturally aware services. You know, our Islamic women's associations, like the MWA, Iowa, the LMAs run programs. Every A, right, has got programs, but it's how's it financially supported and sustained? Because in the end, there's an end date to that rent, to that brokerage. Yes. Where's it going to go? I'm aware, even myself, on behalf of Oslo, we've worked with NZF many times and sent victims of domestic violence to NZF's programs for support, and which I would 100% support in that vein. But again, it needs the financial backing. Definitely. Because there's a single mum is worth X amount, but then there's a mother with 5 kids, and then you got the next one coming in and they can only stay in their accommodation for 3 months, and they got to move on. During
a rental crisis,
it's very difficult. There's a shortage of housing, and so absolutely there's a shortage of resources, and it's something our community should definitely be looking into to further their support and not just rely on the government.
So, on this point of community, where do we as a community play a role in this? Is it just education and prevention? What do you think our role is as a community in regards to tackling domestic violence head on?
To be real with you, our role in this community is every single step. Every sister or brother we lose is on us. All right, this didn't happen in isolation. There would have been triggers, there would have been warning signs, there would have been cries for help, either seen or heard. And for every person who decided not to get involved, there's an accountability there. We have become a society of bystanders, and nobody gets involved unless it's affecting them. That wasn't what our community was about. That wasn't what our Prophet was about. So that's something we've definitely lost, and we need to bring back. We can't just talk the rhetoric of the ummah.
When we speak ummah, we think ummah is like overseas, past our borders. We don't actually see it as anything local or anything that's next door.
Yeah. And as much as your heart can bleed for Palestine and your heart can bleed for the Burmese, your heart needs to bleed for the girl down the road who's you're hearing getting screamed at every night and you're doing nothing. So there is a lot to be said for rhetoric and action. And I also believe it's not just it's business owners. Who you're donating to, who are you supporting in these programs, where are you looking for meaningful impact on where your money goes? It's not just for bragging rights. the masjid can't do everything, right? It's about also who are you hiring or who are you appointing in these committees? Where are the women's voices being heard in Islamic committees? Are the right people sitting in the right spots to be able to improve this community with no agenda? Or are we going to keep holding dynasties for the rest of our life? If our community doesn't move forward in worrying about the social issues on the ground, it's going to come back and bite them.
I'm a great believer in whatever happens in society is reflective of what will happen to our community as well, because that's where we're living. Yeah. We're living here. Yeah. So this epidemic with vaping in the community, if we don't have a proactive approach towards it, we're going to see it within us. Likewise, everything else, every other ail of society, every other disease in society will show up at our doorstep at any moment due to us living here, due to us being part of this society. So, us as a community, I say this like in the sense of what should our approach be towards accepting this idea, and then what do you think the process is to try and fix this issue or try and be proactive in this? For example, we only take domestic violence seriously when it hits home, but we know what happens. We only take drug addiction seriously when it hits home, but it's rampant everywhere. Yep. How do we accept that as our responsibility? Like, I know it's a very tough and heavy question because we've seen our community resources are usually mobilized for building buildings. Yes. And, that stops there. And we have young viewers that are online now. They're listening in. They may be thinking, how can I improve the state of the community? What would you say to them? What could they contribute, and which career trajectory could they follow to try and assist in this? So I know that you're at a strategy level at the moment, but it wasn't always like that. It's
a great question. I remember years back speaking to certain members of the community and their budding students and where they're going to get into in life.
It's usually doctor, lawyer, engineer.
And I said, don't do that. I said, and as you can see, that's why we have an abundance of doctors, lawyers, alhamdulillah, engineers. What we needed back then was psychologists that specialize in children, psychologists that specialize in addiction, right? And that's still the case.
It's worse now.
We have all these other substances, all these other means of addictions.
Drugs now.
Yeah, all these other addictions. What's happened here, though, is with the flow on of certain social media platforms, we've hero worshipped influencers. We have re-glorified wealth. We've really glorified money. The moment you do that, remember, and I'm just a little bit older than you, Ali. When I was a child, the best thing you could ask me is, what do you want to be when you grow up? Right? Whether I was in kindergarten or year 1 or year 2, year 3. It was my favorite question. I will speak to year 12 kids now and they got no idea what they want to do. I'll speak to year 5 kids where you think there's aspiration. I want to be a YouTuber, right? For us, it's not about what the action is. It's become the object is to get that wealth and to get that status. And this is what's going to lead to you more drug dealing, more crime, because it's where none of us want to work for the money. We all want the quick gratification.
That's why all these Ponzi schemes were so...
Well, this is why we get ripped. Yeah, because the people...
Prominent over the last few years.
Exactly. Jump on the greed. Quick money.
every 6 weeks.
Yeah, quick. It's got to be halal. But our issue leads back, and the important point you've made is what can we do, and what are they? Looking at the youth, I don't care what you do. It's why you do it. You need to own the why. If the reason you want to do something is to improve the condition of your family, of your community, of yourself, you're going to hopefully go into proper vocational programs. We are not focused on what's to come. That's our issue. We're under attack in terms of what we can speak. You got to be careful what you say now. We got all these gender talk. We've got a million reasons where we have to be quiet in what we say. And all we've done is shut our kids up on small menial things, and the most important things in the world we're not focusing on. We need to let our children understand what a healthy relationship is, and we can't be ignorant parents and think, they're gonna come out like, prophets, and our daughters aren't Mary. Okay, at the end of the day, there's going to be relationships, there's going to be interactions. They're either going to do it behind your back in the shadows with no support, experience, or guidance, right? And things can go very bad. Or they're going to have such a sheltered view on what life is like, and then when it's time for them to go out, they just get completely exploited there. They're just cannon fodder. So parents, both father and mother, need to take the opportunities to explain what a healthy relationship is, but also, more importantly, do it. If me and my wife aren't appropriate in front of my children and how we deal with conflict and what we discuss in what's healthy and what's not healthy, they're going to learn from our actions, not from our words. So that's a really important part. Our community leadership needs to pick the best person for the job. That's all you have to do. Do what you do in your business. This is what kills me. A lot of these people...
I've seen community members that are known to bash their wives.
Yes.
And they're wearing the black and white ribbons and they're marching, say no to violence.
Yeah.
They're literally the head of the pack.
Yeah. So if we're not going to call out our leadership on the hypocrisy and the double standards, then we are just as complacent. We're complicit, right? Then we're saying, go do your thing. How you lead our mosques, how you lead our Islamic schools, how you lead our sporting organizations, all the empires that are trying to compete with each other. If this becomes the focus, it just reminds me of that hadith about, we're competing for lofty buildings. But it's funny, we thought it'd be the business people doing that, but it's not.
It's the religious people.
It's not the business people.
SubhanAllah.
So we have to go back to basics. That's the answer.
So what you're saying is that we need, as fathers and mothers, possibly teachers, to explicitly instruct and teach what a healthy relationship is. Now, for that to occur, though, first and foremost, I believe from a spiritual aspect, we got to connect our children to Allah Azza wa Jal. So firstly, having a healthy connection between you and Allah, that is the standard point between you and everyone else. So if I know that with Allah Azza wa Jal, I have a certain etiquette and way I deal with Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, then from there, I understand that I'll be asked about what I do, I'll be rewarded for what I do. I'm always mindful of what I do because there are consequences to my actions, both spiritual and metaphysical, in the sense of my heart becomes black and whatnot, rather than pure. From there, then stems okay, when I have conflict with someone, what I do in this space reflects on my character, and that first and foremost reflects on my relationship with Allah Azza wa Jalla. So if I honor this, then I would follow through and honor and show up in the world as someone that has prophetic character.
Yes.
Someone that has character that values individuals. Someone that values a relationship. Someone that understands what that connection means. So, our current situation, and I've been thinking about this over the last few months. How can we onboard our community in reconnecting to Allah further than just their obligations? Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Onboarding them where there's that connection between you and Allah, where you are that mindful. It's not like in the khutbah you hear, يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. We hear it every Friday. Oh, you have believed. Fear Allah Azza wa Jal. It should be mindful in the sense of taqwa is further than just fear. It's being mindful of all of your actions that are brought forth to Allah Azza wa Jal. So be mindful to Allah Azza wa Jal and do not die, do not, pass away except in a state of submission to Allah's will and to what Allah commands and to what Allah expects from us. We hear this every Friday, but the actions are not reflective of that. Do you think it's a disconnect between leadership and followers? Is it a disconnect between me and the Quran? Is it a disconnect between us and Islam? Because you being a person of strategy, we can fix little things, but we know that if we shift the culture, you shift everything. It's not just me fixing a problem now. I can fix hundreds of problems by just doing one thing, twisting one thing, altering one aspect. What do you think it is here?
Look, you've touched on critical points here. The biggest...
Buy my ebook.
the biggest thing for me is who taught you who God was? We are learning, and this is going to be very popular. We are learning the religion, I believe, backwards. We are being told the inherent Sharia instructions for governance of certain things, before we even truly understand who we are in the universe, what is the purpose?
Who am I as a human being?
What was the purpose of our existence? What is the first two verses of Surah Al-Baqarah to explain to you where hudan lil muttaqin? What is that? God promised you guidance. Verily, this is the book, this is the Quran, a guidance for those who have taqwa. So it's not guidance for everybody. There's conditions here. You have to do something. You have to attain some taqwa. But then God gives you in the next few verses how to get that. Right? He tells you need to attest the faith. You need to do your prayers. You need to do your charity. So forth. We are given instructions. That is not what I see when I go Fridays. I am being given a 25-minute, 15, 30-minute window. And I feel for the khatib because he's got this little time in point, and every person's like, just hurry up, man, so we can pray to and get out. And there's nuggets of wisdom that need to be given. But your audience is a 75-year-old all the way down sometimes to a 3-year-old, depending on how liberal our masala is.
How inclusive.
If you asked me as a speaker to come and speak to that kind of audience, that's tough. Right? My audience is very varied and in comprehension and understanding, and I've got a tiny window, and it's an obligation, and I have a captive and a not so captive audience.
And I'm representing the Prophet here.
Absolutely. What a responsibility. So I don't believe the khutbah is the way to go. It's an unrealistic expectation. But I do believe where Ramadan is an opportunity, I do believe radio is an opportunity, podcast is an opportunity, sending the proper messages. And I think in stages of our children's lives, there should be programs that are relevant to their age and comprehension to slowly introduce them to God first, then His prophets, and then understanding what the rules and regulations are. It's how Islam was taught, right? We learned God. We learned what that was about. We learned understanding on what the word of God was. Its beautiful esoteric meanings, its strong impacting meanings, along with the practical applications of those meanings. Where here, I look at a TikTok video, and if I say 45 times blah, 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 then I might get this, right?
Transactional.
Yeah, it's all 100%. You've nailed it. Everything is about what can I do to quickly erase this and achieve this.
So that is the same mindset, if you were to zoom out, same mindset as the person who only glorifies money.
100%.
It's transactional.
Yeah.
So my relationship with Allah Azza wa Jal here is transactional.
Yeah.
When if I do this, then I'll receive that. If I do this, then I'll receive that.
Yeah.
Why is this disconnect happening? Where did it come from? Is it because us as human beings, we have forgotten what this connection was? We don't really truly believe in it? Or is it because of how we were trained? Was it part of, or was it a lack of training? Like, for example, I'm in schooling, okay? I'm currently writing a program where I need certain outcomes to be met. So I want, for example, to teach fiqh salat, the rulings behind prayer to a certain audience. However, I see that for them to be adoptive and receptive to this prayer, then I have to add on something that's enlightening in spirit. So there's another book, for example, Inner Dimensions of Prayer, which speaks about the soul's ibadah in the prayer, not just your body's ibadah. So I'm trying to marry the two in the sense of its delivery, and then having that in an engaging experience for these students to take on, where it's not just, okay, your obligation is to firstly have wudu, you must have the intention, it must be the time of prayer must have entered, you have to be facing the qibla. It's not just that anymore, it's just a practical sense, transactional, in a way where you complete your prayer, you get the blessings, you move on, you move on with life. In a secular society today that is removing all aspects of spirituality, where, for example, a concept in Islam like saying the morning and evening adhkar, you can't quantify that in any way. You cannot ever measure qualitatively or quantifiably the effect and barakah of the morning adhkar. Can you? No, it's not. It's purely a exercise of the soul, where I mindfully recite these dua, hoping for the blessings and the protection from Allah Azza wa Jal. But there's no qualitative or quantifiable way to measure this. So our current dunya inspired or driven lifestyle rejects that.
Yeah.
I'll just remove that completely.
Because
and you know what? It's not an obligation, so I won't do it anyway.
Because you're missing one key thing. What does the Quran say many, many times? Verily, this is for those who ponder. Verily, this is for those who reflect. Where's the reflection? Where's the pondering anything? Where's the contemplating? And if we haven't, like even now, what I'm worried about, and I have this fear for the next generation that will come, I think the attention span will be so deplorable that we're going to lose scientists, we're going to lose medical professionals, we're going to lose engineers, because unless AI takes over completely, we're actually not going to be able to look after ourselves, right? Because we haven't read a book end to end, you know, for for generations. It becomes something very, very significant. So I think for us, we need to really start focusing on the children that are coming up now, that screen time,
what they're being
the
exposed
engaging,
to.
how are you going to engage when you're doing
the habits that they're building.
Family talks around the table. There's a lot to be said. I mean, our scholars, we learn at the feet of our scholars. You know, that's all gone, right? So we need to kind of try to bring that back in some way. If I'm not teaching my son how important honesty is, how important it is for him to uphold his sister's honor, how important it is for him to be a safe bastion for her if she ever needs him, then I'm missing out on these opportunities, right? And I'm hoping that the iPhone will be able to teach him, right? I'm hoping that the iPad can teach my youngest. That's a real issue. And I think for us, there needs to be a lot more focus on parenting, because for us, at home is where everything starts. If you can have a stable home, you're already ahead of the game, okay? You have the supports, the network's ready to go. So hopefully you'd be able to pick and discern between a partner that's coming to ask for your daughter that's not appropriate. You'll be like, we're onto this. Okay, because I'm engaged. I'm engaged in this conversation. I'm looking for observations, looking for behaviors, and I'm seeing how he deals.
So you've taken on the role of a father here.
Absolutely.
That's what the current way that society works here. It's more of, okay, someone's asked for a hand, is he able to support it financially? No problem, see you later.
Yeah.
Don't get divorced to him, ever. It's your fault if it happens. Yeah.
That's a big problem. We do this a lot as dads. There are a lot of dads that will go, you know, if something happens, don't come back here.
Yeah.
Well, what are you doing? Where is that written anywhere? If you leave my house, don't come back.
It's a cultural shame. Yeah. You know, it actually isn't part of religion.
No, of course not.
There's no shame in divorce.
No. It's why it's there. But what is heartbreaking is you're looking at these, especially these sisters that you're like, I can't go back because my dad will kill me if I come back home. What kind of dad is that? Who is your role model in this? Who did this? Which prophet do you know did this? Shunned his daughter and said, don't come back to the house. So we're supposed to be forgiving and understanding, but only when it suits you, Habib. So I think there's a lot to be said for the right compassion when it comes to dealing with unhealthy relationships.
So just to summarize or synthesize what you're saying is, the first step for us to take action here as individuals is to work on those foundational relationship skills. Firstly, understanding what a healthy relationship is through seeing it, is observing it, experiencing it. So then we break that cycle. That's what domestic violence is. It creates a cycle.
Yes.
As you said, you know, it occurs in front of children. Children see that as normal. It occurs to them, or they perpetrate that in the future. And the cycle continues and continues and continues. And the cycle of that usually breaks with either education, jail time, where it's separation, or death. Have I?
True.
That's subhanallah. Danny, if there are victims, I want you to think about the victims that are potentially listening right now.
Yeah.
I'd like you to look into your camera. This one here, please. If you have any words to say to them directly of support.
I think victim is a strong word as well. You know, we in terminology for domestic violence, we call it survivors, because you're surviving something that's you're basically a war's being waged on you, and you're surviving that war. There is no shame in reaching out and asking for help. You definitely are not alone in this scenario. So many people are going through this, unfortunately, and there are strong systems in place to be able to give you bastions of security. And opportunities for you to get out of this violence. There's absolutely no shame in asking for help. The shame is the perpetrator. That's what's shameful. And I think especially if within our community, the organizations definitely have a lot more education and understanding and resources to combat these things. And I think it's about reaching out to the right organizations. If in doubt, go to your health professional. If you're too scared to go to the police, I would definitely say go to your health professional. They keep your confidence and they'll know where to steer you.
Thank you very much for that. To our viewers, I'd like to thank you very much for tuning in today. Thank you, Brother Danny,
My
for
pleasure.
coming in. It was our pleasure
Thank
and
you.
our privilege to have you here.
Thank you.
Alhamdulillah. Just a last word. This episode was sponsored by NZF, and we really need your support in regards to getting support for or backing for our Healing Forward program. We're NZF. We have a program that directly assists those going through domestic violence and also has a proactive approach towards keeping families together. So please, firstly, if you're someone who requires assistance, feel free to contact NZF. And if you're someone who wants to support NZF in this regard, then do donate towards the Healing Forward program. All the details can be found on our website. And we thank you so much for your support. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت واستغفرك اللهم وأتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.